Chapter 662 Interrogation 1. After breakfast the next day, the two sent King Rui some tonics made with ginseng, Ganoderma, bird's nest, wolfberries, longan, donkey hide, and so on. They were all high-quality products produced in the interspace. After delivering his supplements, the couple drove a carriage out of the city. After leaving the city, Zhou spread out her divine senses. After confirming that no one was following them, they went straight to a mother god temple. Offering some incense, they went up the mountain in the name of sightseeing. They found a remote cave. After confirming there was no danger, Zhou threw the two people inside her interspace out. Seeing that they were still unconscious, Gu Qingrui nodded in satisfaction. He went forward and gave them the antidote. About 15 minutes later, the two woke up one after another. When the coachman saw them, his face was filled with fear. He immediately shrank back and asked, What do you want? You should know, but you have to thank us for finding you such a good place for your burial. Zhou commented and pointed at the green mountains and rivers outside. You can't, why can't we? If you can do the first, we can do the 15th. It's fair, no. Tell me, how do you want to die? No, I don't want to die. It's her, Magu threatened me. Her mistress is the old concubine of the Marquis of Dingon. If you want to find the person who harmed you, you should look for them instead. The coachman shouted. Wait. How come you know my identity? Magu suddenly injected and asked. Do you think you're the only smart one here? Among those bandits, a few of them had seen you go to a mother god temple together. Naturally, they knew you two were master and servant and discovered your identities. Otherwise, do you really think they are so easily threatened? The coachman shook his head regretfully. Unfortunately, their luck is not as good as they thought. Magu looked up at the couple and said, Since you already know the ins and outs of the matter, give me a quick death. I know you're not afraid of death, but your nephew should be. Or rather, you don't want your nephew to die. Zhou replied with a smile. However, her eyes had no smile, they were filled with provocation. Magu finally knew fear. She did not know if Xiao Su was in their hands, so she closed her eyes and took a deep breath. Tell me, what do you want to know? Smart. No wonder your madam appreciated you. My request is simple. Tell me everything you know about the evil deeds that Mrs. Liu has done. Impossible. That's fine. It seems that your only nephew, Xiao Su, isn't that important. How about I send him to accompany you to meet your ancestors? Magu struggled violently a few times, but she couldn't stand up. She thought of something and quickly calmed down. Whatever. I like that. I guess you gave your nephew 2,000 taels of silver for nothing. It wasn't difficult to bribe that man called Ernyo in the small courtyard of XX Alley. Magus' pupils constricted when she heard that. She really did not expect that the couple would find the tunnel entrance. If the heavens do evil, you can go against it. If you do evil, it's the end of you. Fine, it'll fulfill your wish. Someone like you, whose hands are stained with blood, doesn't have the chance to turn over a new leaf anyway. Remember to be more picky when you reincarnate in your next life. Don't be a cow or a horse, as it will be tiring. Zhou took out 2 silver notes from her sleeve and waved them before Magus' eyes. Magu was utterly dumbfounded when she saw the familiar handwriting on the banknote. She didn't think that Xiao Su would really fall into their hands. Chapter 663 Interrogation 2. Zhou looked at her mockingly and said, When I said I have eyes on him, there's no need to lie to you. That's right, she only had eyes on him, as she didn't waste effort catching him. She just borrowed his silver notes and would return them later. When Magu heard this, the little bit of hope in her heart was completely gone. She recalled her life's experiences. Although she did not have to worry about food and clothing after entering the Lu residence and following her mistress, she had done too many evil things to stabilize her position. After entering the Marquis residence, she dipped her toes in many sinful acts and even dragged her family into it. Over the past few years, as her family left one by one, she did not know if it was because she had found her conscience, old age, or retribution. She would get jolted awake by nightmares every night. These nightmares were all scenes of her murdering orders, making her uneasy. Recently, it was getting more difficult for her to even fall asleep. This was also the reason why she urged her nephew to leave. She was afraid that he would follow her old path. But Xiao Su, thinking of this, she looked at the couple and asked, "If I tell you, will you really let Xiao Su go?" "Of course. To put it bluntly, he was only implicated by you." Zhou nodded. "All right, I'll tell you. After I'm done, I hope you can give me a quick death and a simple burial." As Magu said this, she sank into her memories. A moment later, she slowly began to talk about how she had framed her other maid sisters. After becoming Mrs. Lu's personal maid, she helped drug Sun Wenhao for their marriage to become real. She helped Mrs. Lu ascend her position from a nameless concubine to second in place all the way until now. There were at least 80 people who had died in her hands. At the same time, as she started to recall her memories, Gu Qingrui pressed the button of a recording pen. "Do you have any evidence or witnesses for what you said?" "There is physical evidence. It is stored in a dark room of the master bedroom in the 4th courtyard of Scholarflower Lane, in the south of the city. If there is nothing there, it means it's been destroyed. As for witnesses, they were all dead except for the madam." At this point, Magu looked at the coachman and added, "He's one of them." The coachman rolled his eyes, as what he had done was nothing compared to hers. As Zhou listened to Magus' expressionless narration, she had to admit that Magu was an intelligent person. It was really not easy for her to survive after murdering so many. "How much do you know about the Marquis of Dingan's wife, the Empress Mother?" "As far as I know, she has done far more evil than you. Indeed, their hands are stained with more blood than mine. In the beginning, it was because the Marquis was too much of a playboy. For the sake of her children, she killed many of the Marquis women and children. Later on, it was for the Empress, and now, it was for the sake of pushing King Hui to the throne. Every step they took was over countless human lives. Of course, the Empress had claimed countless lives herself. I know that they have an intelligence organization specializing in collecting information. It is mostly made up of orphans and palace maids that will spread to the families of various officials. This helps them collect information or control the people they want to control." When Magu said this, she looked at the couple and said, "Yang Shiqing's second wife, Mrs. Chui, is a perfect example of being controlled by them. There are also some of them in your residence now. You have to be careful of those sweet-mouthed and especially diligent people." When Zhou heard her words, she immediately thought of Xiaxiang and asked, "Do you know how many of them there are?" Chapter 664 Interrogation 3. I don't know the exact number and only know that they are divided into 6 groups. The capital has 2 groups, and the rest are all in other places. The old madam was the chief helmsman who issued their orders. Zhou and Gu Qingrui were a little scared after hearing this. This organization was much larger than they had imagined. "Can you tell me what the old madam has done to those government officials?" Zhou asked again. The old marquis had a younger cousin who grew up together. After they married, he took her in as a noble concubine who gave birth to the family's eldest son. Even after the old madam gave birth to the empress, she still took advantage of the fact that the marquis was not at home to frame his younger cousin for drugging the other concubines and miscarrying a newly formed male fetus. At that time, the Marquis mother was still around, so she punished the noble concubine to kneel in the ancestral hall for 3 days and nights. Later, the old madam harmed the eldest son and framed the concubine, who had just miscarried. The 2 concubines were injured in a big fight and died shortly after. I knew this because I had roped in a servant girl on the old madam's side. It was only then that I realized how childish my methods were. It was also this that inspired me and allowed me to walk all the way to where I am now. Is it that easy to rope in someone by her side? Those who are ambitious and jealous are naturally easy to rope in, but the old madam will always be the winner. Before that servant girl could climb into the Marquis' bed, she was framed by the old madam and executed for having an affair with an outsider. There was also the death of the late Empress. But what I know of that is limited. I only overheard the second master mentioning that he blames the Empress Dowager for being a busybody, or else the previous Empress and the Zhou family would have disappeared together. It was also then that I found out that the old madam had an organization that specialized in collecting intelligence. Now that I think about it, the so-called evidence of the Zhou family colluding with the enemy and betraying the country back then was something that the old madam had gotten someone to frame them. Anything else? There's also Consort Kang's miscarriage. Magu probably did not want to bring any secret into her grave, so she continued to spill everything nonchalantly. 4 hours later, her throat was so dry that she couldn't speak anymore. Seeing this, Zhou turned around and left the cave. She packed a bag of food from her interspace and brought it in. In addition to some buns and spiced beef, there was wine and a plate of strawberries. She handed it to Magu and said, "For the sake of your sincerity, have your last meal." "Thank you." Magu nodded. She grabbed a strawberry and started eating. As for whether it was poisoned or not, she didn't care. After all, it was her last meal. Gu Qingrui kicked the coachman and asked, "Is there anything else you want to say?" I am different from her. Besides helping her drive you guys in a carriage, I have only helped her transport goods out of the city a few times over the past 2 years. What goods? I only know that the last 2 times were corpses. At the beginning, I was too focused on the great reward to notice what the goods were. All of his goods are corpses. They are people who died because they did not complete their assigned tasks in the residence, including my younger brother. Gu Qingrui looked at the coachman and commented, "You should eat and drink with her." The coachman was stunned for a moment and quickly shook his head. He didn't want to have a last meal. Gu Qingrui did not try to persuade him further when he saw his rejection. After Magu had eaten and drunk her fill, Zhou took out 2 pieces of potassium cyanide and handed them to the 2 of them. The coachman looked at the white pill and refused to eat it, no matter what. Gu Qingrui went forward and pinched his cheeks to feed them. He downed it with a glass of wine. An undertaker who would accept any job with money would be a disaster anyway. The main issue was that he knew too much. Chapter 665 Plan Magu happily took it and directly put it into her mouth. She looked at Zhou and said, "Remember to bury me and let Xiao Su go." He didn't kill anyone. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground, but Shet still stared at Zhou. "Don't worry, we won't make things difficult for him." Zhou nodded. Magu smiled when she saw this and stopped breathing. At the same time, the coachman also breathed his last. After that, the couple cleaned up the scene and wrapped the 2 corpses in a mat. They found a sunny place and buried them separately. After she was done with her work, Zhou took out some joss paper money stored in her inner space, burned a large pile for each of them, and went down the mountain after that. When they returned to the capital, the sky had already darkened, and there were no longer many people on the streets. The 2 went straight to the south of the city and first took a look at the 2 shops they had bought. They didn't expect a small restaurant to open on this street, too, and the business was good. Out of curiosity, the two of them went in for a meal. They were surprised that there were only rice and stir-fried dishes. There were no real restaurant-level dishes at all. The couple made do with a meal and finally drove the carriage to their shop to prepare some water and fodder for the horses. The two of them quietly found number 4 of Scholarflower Lane and opened the door with the key they took from Magu. They went straight to the master bedroom, and Zhou used her divine senses to search the room. Finally, she found a button on the inner side of the bed and pressed it. Soon, a small, dark room appeared under the bed. The two did not move the bed. Instead, Zhou directly kept it in her interspace. After checking the place and confirming that there was nothing of value, they erased any traces of their presence and quickly took their carriage back to the manor. After washing up, the two entered the space and checked the things that Magu had left behind. To be honest, there was really nothing valuable. There was a small quilt made of quality wool, a jade pendant, some pieces of jewelry, a dagger, and a rope with blood on it. Finally, there was a large bag of soul-severing incense, a poison that Magu had made herself. Gu Qingrui frowned and said, "I'm afraid these are useless. There should be a use for it, but there is no suitable opportunity at the moment." Zhou replied with a worried look, "It seems we killed Magu in a hurry. These things probably won't be able to trouble Mrs. Liu." Wrong. Magu dares to speak to us, but when facing the old madam, she would rather commit suicide than speak. This is her servitude that's carved into her bones. Otherwise, she wouldn't have to obey orders to commit murder, even though she hated it. Gu Qingrui said, "Actually, there is a better way. Let the two wives of Marquis Dingon fight among themselves. That way, even if Mrs. Liu doesn't die, she won't be in the mood to find trouble with us. They need money to fund their organization. Don't you know where Mrs. Liu's private stash is? Just take it." "Wait, explain first how we make them fight among themselves," Zhou asked curiously. "I remember that in the list of spies, there's someone who is closely monitoring Mrs. Liu. If the spy were to die at Mega's hands, what do you think the old madam would think?" Zhou Ying's eyes lit up when she heard that. The poison used by Magu, soul-severing incense. That's right. Didn't she say that she made the poison herself? I don't think the old madam is ignorant about this. Chapter 666 Strike. After all, Magu is nowhere to be found now, Zhou said with a smile. "Not bad, let's give it a try," Gu Qingrui said. Zhou nodded and then found the servant girl's information. She didn't expect that she was one of Mrs. Liu's personal servant girls who was usually responsible for serving tea and helping to manage the household accounts. She shook her head and said, "I don't know if Mrs. Liu is that blind or if this spy is too successful. Perhaps that spy was too successful. Magu never mentioned it, so it seems that they don't know." "That's true. Looking at her age, she should have been by Mrs. Liu's side for quite some time." Presumably, this was one of the hidden reasons why Mrs. Liu was able to rise to the top. After Zhou finished speaking, she turned around and got busy. Once they were done with their work and everyone was almost asleep, Zhou took the soul-severing incense and gave it to the spy. She even deliberately left some incense that had yet to be burned out. She later threw the corpse of the spy into a dry well in a side courtyard where Magu often stored her victims. In the end, she took all of Mrs. Liu's private stash of treasure into her space. She also returned Xiao Zu's 2,000 taels of silver. After Gu Qingrui sent Gu Qinglin off the next morning, Zhou called Zhou Dong over and said, "Brother Zhou Dong, how's your learning at the tea house? Can you manage a small shop now?" "Yes, to put it bluntly, I've got to be sweet with my words, quick on my feet, and keep the accounts diligently. Although I can't manage a big restaurant, I can manage a small shop." Zhou Dong nodded. "Good. Now that the wheat and rice from all over the country are coming in, you can start now if there's no problem. The shop over there needs to be repaired, too. Let's start in the new month since there are only a few days left in this month. It's also to give some time for my manager to look for someone else to take over my position. It's great that you know how to be considerate of others. Oh, right. Have you thought it through? Are you sure you want to open a snack shop? Zhou asked. Yes, we have the skills for this, and we don't need much manpower. The two of us can handle it. Alright, it's fine as long as you've made up your mind. Thank you, I'll see you soon. Zhou Dong said goodbye, stood up, and left. Zhou was relieved when she saw that he was much more efficient than before. After she left, she and Shizhu went to a restaurant. Niu Fugue, who was instructing someone on the renovation, saw her and immediately stopped what he was doing. Mistress, do you have any advice for me? I'm just here to check on the progress. Then I'll continue with my work. Niu Fugue nodded and went back to work. Zhou glanced around the shop and saw there was nothing much that was ready. She walked to the wooden materials and checked them out. After confirming they were from high-quality red pine, she left with Shizhu. She ordered all kinds of tableware, kitchenware, and so on. This time, she ordered some small iron stoves and the usual copperware. This way, they could sell barbecued meat in winter and even make hot pots, griddle pots, and other dishes. She spent the money happily. On the other hand, the Marquis of Dingon residence was in an uproar. When Mrs. Liu woke up and did not see Ma Gu in the morning, she felt a little uneasy. She wanted to drink some tea, but her usual maidservant was also gone. Immediately, she became frustrated and asked someone to look for her in the residence. The old madam soon received the news that her spy was missing. She used the excuse of concern to ask her servants to help look for her, too. She could no longer remain calm when she found the spy's corpse in the dry well. This was the deepest nail she had planted in the concubine's household. Thinking of this, she immediately went over personally. Chapter 667 A search. Even though she knew the spy was already dead, the old madam's heart still jolted when she saw the spy's bloody face. This was because she couldn't figure out the cause of her death. Was it because she had discovered something and ended up getting her identity found? Was she silenced, or did someone simply kill her? Sister, do you know what's going on? Why is there a dead person in the residence? Mrs. Liu shook her head. To be honest, she was still baffled by the incident. Her maidservant was still fine last night. Why was she gone in the blink of an eye? Moreover, it was in such a tragic way. Most importantly, this was where she and Ma Gu had always hidden their victims. Since Ma Gu also disappeared, was she the one who did it? Why? If it wasn't her, who could it be? Did she discover something? Mrs. Liu's head was about to explode, considering these questions. The old madam looked at Mrs. Liu's troubled face and could tell that she really didn't know. At this moment, the doctor who had finished examining the corpse looked up and said, "Madams, this maidservant died from the soul-severing incense." Soul-severing incense. Let's go to her residence and take a look. The old madam immediately thought of Ma Gu and led her people to the spy's residence. When Mrs. Liu heard this, she also thought of Ma Gu and immediately followed. After entering, she quickly found the soul-severing incense that hadn't been burned out. Mrs. Liu's heart skipped a beat because she was too familiar with this thing. At the same time, the old madam's heart paused. She more or less knew what was going on, but she still pretended to be stupid and asked, "Sister, what's going on? How could such a sinister thing appear in the residence?" "I am not sure either." "Then investigate. Such a dangerous person must not stay in the residence." After the old madam ordered this, she instructed her personal nanny to bring people to start investigating. Magu was usually very cautious, so she did not find the soul-severing incense in her residence. However, Maggie's disappearance was exposed. The old madam looked at Mrs. Liu and asked, "Magu is an old woman by your side. Other than here, does she have any other residence outside?" I do know of a place. It's the place where her maternal family originally lived. It's in North City's XX Lane XX. Mrs. Liu hesitated for a moment before replying. This place was easily found, so she couldn't hide it even if she wanted to. However, she kept the hidden hideout in the city's south a secret. She was afraid that there was something incriminating there that the old madam would find out. When the old madam heard this, she waved at her subordinates. Her subordinate immediately made a trip, but he came back empty-handed. According to the investigation, the courtyard had been emptied a few days ago. After the old madam received the reply, she asked someone to investigate further. Mrs. Liu was a little scared. If the courtyard was empty, did Magu run away? Magu knew too much. Thinking of this, she felt a chill down her spine. She had to look for Magu as soon as possible. She hoped that she had been stumped by something instead of going entirely missing. Otherwise, she would be in big trouble. When the old madam saw this, she called the butler over and asked him to prepare a coffin for the maidservant. She returned to her own courtyard. After a moment of silence, the old madam called over a servant girl and whispered a few words into her ear. The servant girl nodded and quickly retreated. When Mrs. Liu returned to her room, she still had a glimmer of hope in her heart, so she did not act immediately. Instead, she waited until night fell. After confirming that there were still no signs of Magu, she finally could not sit still anymore. After everyone had gone to sleep, Mrs. Liu entered the secret passage that Magu often took. When she came out, she saw a man waiting in the courtyard. She went up and asked, "Liu Xing, is there any news about Magu?" Chapter 668 Discovery. "Madam, why did you come personally?" Liu Xing quickly got up and helped her sit on a chair. "I'm here to look for Magu. Do you have any news about her?" "No, Magu didn't come back after she left last night. Today, I went out during the day to look for her, but there were no signs of her at all." At this point, Liu Xing thought of what happened during the day and asked, "Did something happen in the residence?" "I saw that the first household's people were also looking for Magu." Mrs. Liu did not hide anything and told him about the dead maidservant in the residence and the old madam's suspicion that Magu did it. She added with a frustrated expression, "It doesn't help that Magus' nephew, Xiao Su, has been missing for a few days. Could it be that Magu sent Xiao Su on another errand?" "That's possible. Since you haven't slept yet, let's go to Magus' house and see what's going on." "I'll go by myself. It's late at night, you should go back and rest early." "No. Let's go. I'll feel uneasy if I don't go there personally." "All right then." Liu Xing nodded and pulled a small carriage. He brought her to Scholarflower Lane in the southern part of the city. When they arrived at number 4, their hearts sank when they saw the locked door. "Open the door, we must see it clearly today." Liu Xing nodded, then removed a hairpin from his head. He went forward and fiddled with the lock a few times before opening it. After entering the house and lighting the oil lamp, Liu Xing scanned the room and frowned. "It looks like Magu didn't pack up and leave." The old lady ignored him and looked around the room carefully. After confirming that Maggie didn't run away, not only did she not relax, she became even more uneasy. After all, she had just asked Magu to tamper with the wood of Gu Shengru's restaurant. She feared Magu was caught, as she would be in trouble if she confessed something. "Madam, we should leave. We cannot let the people in the residence discover anything unusual." Lu Xing urged her at this moment. Okay, let's go. Mrs. Lu nodded, turned around, and walked out. When she was about to leave, she suddenly thought of the secret room Ma Gu had mentioned and immediately returned. She fumbled around the bed and quickly found the mechanism. Then, the two of them moved the bed to the side. When she saw the empty secret room, Mrs. Lu's eyes went black, and she almost fainted. Seeing this, Lu Xing also knew the implications. The problem was, he wasn't sure if this meant Ma Gu had confessed or if she had escaped with the things. Then, he helped Mrs. Lu sit on the bed and said, "Madam, you have to hold on. Quick, take me back to the other side of the secret room." Mrs. Lu urged him, immediately stood up, and walked out. Seeing this, Lu Xing could only blow out the lamp and chase after her. After the two returned to the small courtyard, they quickly descended the tunnel and came to the other end. This time, Mrs. Lu couldn't care less about her family's ancestors and relit an oil lamp in the middle of the room. She lifted a black cloth and went inside the secret room. When she saw the empty room, her vision turned black. She spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground stiffly. This gave Lu Xing a massive fright. Of course, when he saw the empty secret room, his legs also went weak and buckled. What was supposed to be here were more than half of their branch's assets, but now, he picked up the oil lamp and carried the old madam out of the dark room. He carefully placed her on a mattress in the ancestral hall, rekindled the oil lamp, and walked out while carefully examining the place. Chapter 669. Falling sick. Unfortunately, he found no trace of it even after searching everything. Most importantly, there wasn't even a single track mark on the outside. There were so many gold and silver in there. They would have to leave a mark of some sort when the thieves took them all away. But there was nothing. This made his hair stand on end, reminding him of the heinous Yang residence robbery case. At that time, Lord Yang had used his connections with King Hui to investigate the whole city for 3 days but found nothing. Later, Lord Yang quickly lost his life. Thinking of this, he couldn't help but think of Ma Gu. He hoped she had died quietly in that corner instead of betraying the madam. He immediately locked the door and returned to the ancestral hall. When he saw the old madam sitting cross-legged on the mattress in a daze, he was stunned for a moment and asked, "Madam, are you all right? Did you find anything?" Mrs. Lu turned her head and asked. "No traces at all. It's the same as when the Yang family was robbed." At the same time, he was very impressed with the old madam. She had lost more than half of her family's property but could still calm down quickly. It was really not something that anyone could do. "Got it. You can go back. Don't spread this matter." "Yes, then you. I'll be staying quietly here. Don't worry about me. The night is cold. Please don't stay too long." Lu Xing responded and turned to leave. Mrs. Lu sat quietly for nearly 4 hours. When the sky was about to brighten, she slowly rose and returned to her bedroom. The next day, the servants found out the old madam was still asleep and had a high fever. The doctor finished his diagnosis and confirmed that it was a high fever caused by a cold. The servant girl sent by the old madam to monitor Mrs. Lu immediately reported this back. When the old madam heard this, she was very surprised. Although the weather was hot now, maids were on duty at night. How could an esteemed elderly like her catch a cold and even a fever? She probably had something on her mind. "Are you sure she didn't go out last night?" "No, me and my 2 sisters took turns to watch her and did not see her going out." "Go and continue your watch. If there's anything wrong, you must report it in time." On the other end, Zhou finally heaved a sigh of relief after confirming that her plan had worked. Then, she went to the manor with Gu Qingrui. As soon as she exited the carriage, Zhuang, lying listlessly in the yard, immediately stood up and rushed out. When he saw Zhou, he barked sadly and wagged his tail around her. Zhou rubbed its head and said, "It's been hard on you, Zhuang. It's only been a few days, and you've already lost so much weight. Ever since you guys left, he doesn't like to eat much of anything. He only eats a little when there's meat, so he lost weight quickly." Widow Wu replied. "Where's his wife? That little cute dog?" Zhou asked. "He drove her away. On the third day after you left, for some reason, they suddenly fought. Since then, that little dog has never come again." "I see. You go ahead with your work." Gu Qingrui nodded and replied. He knocked on Zhuang's head and said, "Not bad. You didn't grow up to be a wolf. You know that your master is more important than your wife." "What are you talking about?" Zhou rolled her eyes at him. "I'm sure that's the case. I guess he must think that we don't want him anymore because he has a companion." Gu Qingrui smiled. Gu Qingrui didn't know if Zhuang understood him, but as soon as he finished speaking, Zhuang raised his head and barked out twice. Chapter 670 Test 1. Gu Qingrui was very happy to see this. "You scumbag." Zhou kicked Zhuang in a huff. Afterward, Shizhu returned to the carriage and poured the chicken soup and rice she had specially prepared for Zhuang. When Zhuang smelled the chicken soup, he immediately rushed over and wagged his tail as he wolfed it down. Just as they were about to enter the courtyard, Head Fang's son ran over and greeted them. "Master, mistress, it's really you. I thought they were talking nonsense. Didn't you go back to your hometown?" "We didn't manage to." "How is the manor now?" Gu Qingrui asked. "It's going well. The new rice has been planted, and those melon seedlings and vegetables are also growing well. Also, the coal and cabbage can be picked. We can't sell the ones that are too small, so eat them for yourself. We'll start selling those vegetables that are ready in another half a month." "Understood. I'll go do my work then." After saying that, he turned around and ran away. Zhou looked at Gu Qingrui and asked, "What do you think of Xiaofang? Can he be the head of the manor?" "There is no problem with him managing the fields and accounts, but managing people is still a little too soon for him. If it wasn't for the support of Head Fang, I'm afraid he wouldn't have been able to hold on." In other words, there are people who are not convinced of him managing them. "Yes, it's a young man called Lai Shi. He's literate and knows how to do accounts. He has good relationships with others and looks like he can handle things. The main point is that he knows some martial arts." "Martial arts? Where did he learn it?" "He said that he learned it from his uncle. His uncle used to be the guard of the Gu residence. So, he's an old acquaintance. Call him over to test him." "You want to? Do you still remember the 2 small shops I bought in South City? One is for Zhou Dong to start his snack shop, and the other is for us to run ourselves. However, we had yet to find a suitable person to manage it. Perhaps she could give it a try. What about the people from our hometown? Those from our hometown have a strong accent. Getting used to here will take at least a year and a half. Besides, the restaurant needs a lot of people. Even if they came, it might not be enough." "Alright, let's do as you say. I'll bring you to him. He's in charge of the vegetable fields near the greenhouse now." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he brought her to the shed. Although it was no longer needed, Gu Qingrui still planted a lot of vegetables there. It was mainly used to keep their firewood, as storing them in a large compound was much more convenient. As soon as they left, Zhuang couldn't be bothered with his meal anymore. He immediately rushed out and followed them. The two of them smiled and ignored him. When they reached the place, Gu Qingrui called Lai Shi, who was setting up a cucumber rack. When Lai Shi saw the two of them, he quickly bowed. "Greetings, master and mistress. No need to be so polite. We just want to talk to you." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he went to where Chen He and the others were resting and sat down. "Oh." Lai Shi followed them nervously. After they sat down, he asked, "May I know why you are looking for me? I heard that you know how to keep accounts." Shouing commented. "Yes, I can keep track of the daily accounts." Shouing quickly understood what he meant. The bookkeeping he was talking about was the most primitive bookkeeping method she had seen before. To put it bluntly, he would just write down everything without any special format. "Do you have a ready-made account book? Let me see it. Please wait a moment. I have to go home to get it." After saying that, Lai Shi turned around and ran away. He returned a while later with a booklet covered with sweat. "Mistress, please take a look. This is my family's account book." Chapter 671 Test 2. Shouing opened the booklet and glanced at it. It was indeed the most primitive method of bookkeeping. Fortunately, income and expenditure were separated. Moreover, there were daily, monthly, and annual settlements. Overall, it was quite good. Then, she found the most densely packed page and carefully checked the words on it. After making sure there were no mistakes, she asked, "Have you been to school?" "No, but my mother can read, so I learned a little from her. When I was practicing martial arts with my uncle, I learned from the accountant in the residence. That was how I also learned how to keep accounts. I've heard about what happened at the manor." Shouing nodded. "However, since Xiao Fang has already started in his role, it's impossible to change now. But, we don't want to see talent buried. I also have a small shop in South City that is about 100 square meters. I plan to start a food business. Do you think you are qualified if I let you manage it?" Lai Zai's face lit up when he heard that, but he quickly shook his head and said, "But I don't know how to cook." "You don't need to know that. You're just in charge of the management. When the time comes, I'll send you 1 or 2 chefs with 2 waiters." Managing a shop was even more difficult than managing a manor. Not only do you need to manage the shop well, but you also need to manage the outsider relationships. Especially with the neighbors. Next to the shop is a big carriage shop with many merchants inside. You have to build a good relationship with them. After hearing this, Lai Shi suddenly felt uncertain. To be honest, he was able to manage the manor because he had been in contact with it since he was young, so he already understood the way things worked. However, he knew nothing about running a shop. He also knew that it was not easy to maintain a restaurant. He would encounter all kinds of customers and was afraid that he would be unable to handle them. Shouing returned the account book to him, saying, "Go back and think about it. Give me an answer by noon tomorrow at the latest. But you must remember, regardless of whether you agree or not, you are not allowed to go against Xiao Fang in the future." "I understand. Thank you for your appreciation, mistress." Lai Shi nodded repeatedly. After saying that, he put away the account book and returned to work. This kid can't do it, he's a bit of a stickler for rules. If we really want him to manage the shop, I'm afraid we'll have to train him well. Gu Qingrui quipped. There are pros and cons. Although he lacks some drive, it's relatively safe to use such a person. Okay, do as you see fit. I'm only giving my opinions on this and won't participate in the management. Gu Qingrui nodded and went to look for Chen He. I think you just can't be bothered. Shouing stood up and glared at him. She turned around and went home with Zhuang. In the afternoon, Gu Qingrui invited Chen He over for a meal. Afterward, the couple brought Zhuang to the new manor. The new manor had undergone a massive renovation. It had changed from a messy and desolate place to a neat and tidy one. In addition, the saplings had already sprouted, painting the place green. They believed it would be even more beautiful in a few days. They had just entered the vegetable field when Head Fong ran over. "Master, mistress, you're back so soon. We didn't manage to return to our hometown and had to turn back halfway." "Oh right, do you need more seedlings?" Gu Qingrui asked. "Nope, it's all growing well." Head Fong pointed at some spinach and said, "Look at this spinach. There are quite a number of them, but they're thin and weak. What we lack is fertilizer." Chapter 672 Confirmation. It's normal. This land hasn't been fertilized for so many years. It's already not bad that the seedling survived. The next time you water the plants, prepare some wood ash and water it together to see the effect. There was also fertilizer from the livestock pen and mud in the pond. They would all be good for the land in the future. From now on, just start accumulating the fertilizer for the next season. Head Fong nodded, explained the manor situation to them, and brought them around. Unexpectedly, grapes grew the best among all the crops in the village. This gave Zhou a bold idea. If the yield and taste of grapes were good next year, she would plant grapes all over the manor. At most, she would buy another for the vegetables. After they finished looking around, they went to the livestock breeding area again. They returned home once they confirmed that all the little animals looked good. At the same time, King Rui finished his breakfast and went to the palace to meet the emperor, accompanied by his guards. After entering the royal study, King Rui immediately kneeled and greeted him. "Greetings, Imperial Father. I'm sorry that I did not enter the palace in time to report. Eunuchly, please give him a seat." The emperor stood up, walked down, and looked at him. He looked at King Rui's haggard face and sunken eyes and said, "I heard that you were assassinated again." "Yes, the scale this time is not small. The other party sent more than 200 killers. If it wasn't for the vast amount of special powder supplied by Gu Qingrui, I would probably have to say goodbye to Imperial Father forever." "Don't say such depressing words. You are my son, and a dragon won't have a snake for a son. How can you die so easily?" King Rui sneered inwardly after hearing this but still nodded with a poker face. "Fortunately, I have Father to protect me." "Alright, enough of this nonsense. Do you know who did it?" King Rui shook his head after hearing this. This time, the other party did not leave any evidence. Although he had a guess in his heart, it could not be used as evidence, so it was better to pretend he did not know. Otherwise, it would be his fault in the end. The emperor saw through his thoughts at a glance. Although he did not show it on the surface, he was still quite satisfied with King Rui. At least this son of his was someone who could keep his cool and wouldn't complain behind someone else's back. He asked, "What's going on with the East Continent this time? Do you know why they invaded?" "Because the East Continent has many mountains and little land, they don't produce much food. Therefore, they have always wanted to invade our country. This time was no exception. Looking at their skinny appearance, this sudden all-out attack was probably for food." "That's true. The new grain from the south has arrived, after all." The emperor nodded in agreement. He also learned that the East Continent did not have the ability to organize a large-scale battle for the time being. "It seems that your injuries this time are quite severe. Stay in the capital to recuperate and accompany your wives." "I understand. If you don't have any further instructions, I would like to go to the Empress Dowager's place." "Go. It's been a long time since you two last met." After the emperor finished speaking, he returned to his throne. After King Rui left, he called Xiao Heng in and asked, "How's the investigation on 7th Su going?" Your Majesty, it has been verified that 7th Su indeed owns the Ginkgo Leaf organization. In addition, the 4 county magistrates that were replaced last year were all led by him. Also, he had used all sorts of methods to seize many properties and shops. Xiao Heng's report took almost an hour. In short, 7th Su has committed a plethora of crimes over the past few years. They even found out Xiao Lanlan gave birth control pills to Sun Miaoke and the others, even though King Rui had kept it under wraps. Chapter 673 Confession. After the emperor heard this, he snorted coldly and said, "It looks like the Su family is holding back information toward my 4th son. Arrest him." "Yes." Xiao Heng responded and turned to leave. At night, 7th Su was arrested by Xiao Heng and the others on his way home from King Kang's residence. He was secretly brought into the imperial prison for interrogation. Faced with the evidence, especially the matter of assassinating and replacing the court officials, 7th Su did not know how to answer. There was no doubt that he wanted to live, but once he admitted to these things, he, a commoner without any official position, would definitely die. However, he could only push it to King Kong if he wanted to refute these claims. If that happened, King Kong would completely lose the possibility of ascending the throne. The Su family, King Kong, and consort Shu might fall out then. At that time, both sides would definitely suffer. Especially when he and his father had helped the mother and son commit so many crimes. Once they were exposed, there would only be one way out. Therefore, he had no other choice. Yes means yes, and no means no. Your expressions are making me wonder if you have an accomplice or... When Xiao Heng was halfway through his sentence, 7th Su raised his head and replied, "Don't try to exaggerate these claims. I did it, but I learned it from King Hui. He's living a good life in the imperial residence now. Why did you only capture me? Could it be that the emperor lets him go just because he's his son? I have no right to answer on this. The emperor has his own concerns. However, you, a commoner, murdered 4 officials of the imperial court and replaced them. This is a great crime worthy of beheading. Even if you continue to cling to King Hui, you will still be unable to escape death. This isn't fair. Didn't Mother God say that the heaven's net has long arms? I think it's very fair." Xiao Heng retorted. When 7th Su heard the word Mother God, he could not help but remember the lightning strike that had skinned him and shattered his bones. He shivered in fright. Xiao Heng was surprised to see him shivering. After understanding what he was afraid of, he immediately thought of King Hui, who was struck even more seriously than him. He smiled and asked, "Fair enough, right? However, the punishment for the mastermind and the accomplice is different." 7th Su looked up at him and asked, "Why does it sound like Captain Xiao wants to find a scapegoat for me? I'm not that bored." "Then there's nothing more to say. Your investigation was very detailed and comprehensive. I did it. I just have too much money to spend." "Then sign it." Xiao Heng heard that and placed a confession in front of him. 7th Su took it and read it carefully. After ensuring Xiao Heng didn't make up a false accusation, he quickly signed it with his fingerprint. "Escort him into the palace to await his punishment." Xiao Heng ordered and directly took the confession to the emperor. The emperor then realized 7th Su had taken over most of the Gu family's businesses, with more abundant assets than the national treasury. He told Xiao Heng, "I'll need you to do one last spurt. Take all of 7th Su's assets in the capital to the national treasury personally." "Yes." Xiao Heng responded and turned to leave. After he left, the emperor leaned back on the dragon throne with a tired face. At the same time, he deeply understood the meaning of being alone. He really had no one to talk to. Everyone might even be scheming for his life. On the other end, Zhou finally received news from the East Continent through her interspace. Unfortunately, that official was unable to convince their king in the end. But he was willing to give it a try himself. It said that he didn't come out after entering the palace this morning. Gu Shengru's eyes flashed with a trace of disappointment. Keep an eye on them. Report back if there's any new information, but pay attention to your own safety. Yes, this servant will definitely keep an eye on it. Xiaoxiang turned around and left after that. Zhou looked at Niu Lirong, who had always been honest, and asked, "Do you have anything to add?" "No, I don't. However, I heard from my father that the servants of the Marquis of Dingan residence had frequently been coming in and out of their residence over these 2 days. It seemed like something major had happened. This morning, second master's son also rushed back. But the Marquis of Dingan residence's people are very tight-lipped, so we could not inquire about more useful information. Don't ask around anymore. We don't want to attract any unnecessary trouble." "Yes, I will tell my father this later." Niu Lirong left after saying that. After Gu Qingrui finished his tea, he said, "Babe, give me 200 taels of silver. I have to buy some medicinal herbs to prepare." It was much more tidy, and the flowers and trees inside were flourishing. "Good day, mistress." Miao Xiaoyu walked over and bowed. Zhou turned her head and looked at the little girl wearing a straw hat. Although she had tanned a lot, her smile was also much brighter. She asked, "Do you regret your choice back then?" "I don't regret it. I love these flowers, and watching them bloom is an enjoyment for me." "Very good, persevere. When winter comes, I will build a greenhouse for you. At that time, the time to truly test you will come." "Really?" Miao Xiaoyu's eyes lit up. "Would I lie to a little girl like you?" Zhou later gave her a few words of encouragement and then turned around to leave. After returning to the bedroom and lying on the soft couch, she remembered Niu Lirong mentioning Sun Wenhao's return. If she remembered correctly, Sun Wenhao had been captured with Lord Bai. How did he survive? Then, she hurriedly spread her divine sense and looked at the Marquis of Dingan's residence. Chapter 676. Closing the door. At this moment, the Marquis of Dingan residence was in chaos. Not only was Mrs. Liu dizzy from the fever, but even old Madam had fallen seriously ill. Sun Wenhao, the husband of Mrs. Liu, was listening to his eldest son, Sun Qingfeng, report what had happened in the past few days. It turned out that Mrs. Liu was so frightened and confused that she accidentally said that the secret room had been robbed. Although the old madam did not know where the second branch's private stash was, she knew there was definitely a lot of it. Therefore, she went out overnight and fell ill when she returned. That was why Sun Qingfeng quickly sent the letter to Sun Wenhao. He could only write to him and ask him to come back because he didn't know what they had hidden, nor did he know where it was. When Sun Wenhao found out that the treasures that their 2 families had hidden outside had all been taken away, his eyes went black, he fell back into his chair. Among those things, many of them could not be exposed. Especially the embezzling of the Gu family's property back then. If it were discovered, it would be the crime of deceiving the emperor and result in all 9 generations' execution. "Father, are you all right?" Sun Qingfeng quickly held him and asked. "I'm fine. Did you go to King Hui after the incident?" "No, ever since King Hui sneaked out of the residence to meet you, the emperor has sent more people to monitor us. Now, King Hui can't come out, our people can't enter either." Sun Wenhao's eyes narrowed when he heard that. It seemed that the emperor was serious this time. Then, he asked, "Did you find any clues?" "No, the only suspicious thing is Magu, mother's confidant, but I don't think it's possible." No matter how precise her plan was, it was impossible for her to leave no clues behind. Magu. Sun Wenhao's eyes flashed with a thoughtful expression. Magu was a confidant of the Liu family, so she might know where their second branch hid their treasures. However, eldest brother and eldest sister-in-law had carefully arranged their private stash. It was impossible for her to know, so the possibility was not high. At the thought of this, he said, "Now, we can only stay silent. It's best to tuck your tail between your legs and do nothing. Just do our business peacefully. But, it's fine if it's lost. Although it's a little painful, it's not enough to affect our foundation. If the Emperor's people get hold of something, that would be fatal. There shouldn't be people from the Emperor in our residence, right? It's hard to say. When I left, I felt like I was constantly being watched. I tested the person earlier. Based on the person's skills and moves, it's obvious that they were Xiao Heng's subordinates." "What? Could it be that the Emperor has already set his eyes on the Marquis of Dingon residence?" "That's for sure. This time, I was lucky enough to escape with my life. It was to help King Hui gather the materials to build the river embankment. However, I feel like he's playing a long game. Otherwise, why would he choose me, someone guilty, other than the many other merchants? Speaking of which, have you heard that 7th Su has been arrested and all his private property confiscated? As soon as I entered the capital, I heard that Su got a little too arrogant. He even dared to personally attack the county magistrate. However, this is good. 7th Su is King Kang's money bag. If he died, King Kong would definitely suffer a significant loss. Also, don't touch 7th Su's things. The Emperor must be watching. We can't touch them." "Yes. I know that Xiao Heng was the one in charge this time, so I didn't dare to reach out." "That's right. Next, let's learn from that old fox, Prime Minister Su, and close the door to any guests. As for the whereabouts of those treasures, it would be best if we could investigate quietly. Whether they can be found or not could only be left to fate. Now, I only hope that your uncle can act quickly. Otherwise, our faction will probably..." Chapter 677 Time to prepare. Speaking of which, I remembered something. I heard King Rui was nearly assassinated when he returned to the capital. If it's not us, then the only one who has the ability to make a move is King Kong. Do you think 7th Su became King Kang's scapegoat? It seems like King Kong is getting anxious. That's true. In light of the sterilization incident, the Emperor's impression of him will definitely fall rapidly. Then, thinking about it this way, King Rui had become the person most likely to ascend the throne. So should we, don't listen to your cousin's arrangements. Well, wait for your uncle's news quietly. Sun Wenhao stood up and said, "Let's go and comfort your mother. Maybe she'll know something when she wakes up." "Yes." After that, the father and son walked straight to the backyard. Zhou Ying followed them to take a look at Mrs. Liu. After this incident, Mrs. Liu's hair turned completely white, her face became much thinner, and a circle of blisters appeared on her mouth. It seemed she was seriously ill. After confirming she was still running a high fever, Zhou Ying left and looked at King Kang's residence. At this moment, King Kong was drinking with a few strategists. From the tone of his voice, although the Emperor did not ground him, he was suspended from all his duties. They were now discussing how to resume their duties. Seeing this, Zhou Ying shook her head and looked at the Prime Minister's residence again. At this moment, although the Prime Minister's residence looked oppressive, one would find that Prime Minister Su did not seem anxious at all. Instead, he looked very relaxed. Zhou Ying could not help but mutter when she saw this. Could it be that he had a way to save 7th Su? At night, Zhou told Gu Qingrui about this and asked, Rui, do you think Prime Minister Su knows that King Hui is going to attempt a rebellion? Otherwise, why is he not anxious at all? Smart. Actually, King Kong was too reckless this time. If he had discussed it with Prime Minister Su, he would not have agreed to their plans. After all, King Hui and the Empress are more anxious than they were. Therefore, Prime Minister Su is probably waiting for King Hui to make a move. At that time, 7th Su would probably survive. How cunning. However, if King Rui is a hunter under the tree, then, that depends on how long King Rui can stay in the capital. At this moment, King Rui was also discussing this matter with Heartwarming. Your Highness, shouldn't we make a move? Heartwarming asked directly. It's time to prepare. Pull out some unnecessary nails, but don't take action. It's not so easy to be the first to stand out. Understood. You should recuperate well in the residence. Leave the rest to me and Big Brother Feng. Go find Gu Qingrui. Are you trying to pull him in? Since he married Gu wanting to me, he's already prepared to be implicated. Hiding it from him now might harm him instead. However, if something really goes wrong, I'll leave a way out for them. Alright, I'll go find him tomorrow. Heartwarming nodded. The next morning, Gu Qingrui did not see Heartwarming. Instead, he met the butler of King Kang's residence. After Gu Qingrui learned of his intention, he asked in surprise, You must be joking. There are many imperial physicians, yet you asked me to treat your master's injuries. I don't dare to show off my lame skills in front of His Highness. Isn't this courting death? How could that be? His Highness heard that you know how to suture wounds and make them heal faster, so he asked me to invite you. You'd better hurry up, His Highness is still waiting. Chapter 678 Deceived. Since His Highness favors you, regardless of whether his illness can be cured or not, you should go over and take a look. Zhou quipped in as she walked out of the room with a first aid kit. Judging from the butler's intentions, he was adamant about inviting Gu Qingrui over today. Since he couldn't avoid it, he might as well take a look and see what King Kong was up to. Gu Qingrui nodded and said to Zhou, I'll have to trouble you with the matters at home. Go, I'll wait for you. Zhou smiled. After he left, Zhou went to the study and followed him with her divine senses. The journey was smooth. After entering King Kang's residence, the butler brought Gu Qingrui all the way to the study. After entering, King Kong, who was practicing calligraphy, raised his head and said, Cousin, you're here. Sit down. Gu Qingrui looked at King Kang's glowing face and knew he had been deceived. He could not criticize him, but he could at least make things difficult for the butler. Therefore, he turned his head and said, This is your fault. No matter what, you can't joke about His Highness' health. King Kong waved his hand when he saw this. It's me who asked him to say that. Otherwise, how could he have invited you? Seeing this, the butler immediately left. You flatter me. May I know why your Highness is looking for me? Gu Qingrui asked with a smile. Sit down and let's have a chat. Actually, it's not a big deal. The vegetables from the manor have arrived, so I wanted to invite you over for a meal. After King Kong finished speaking, he sat down first. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui could only sit opposite him. However, he did not believe a single word he said. He just did not know what King Kong was up to. Soon, a servant girl came over with a pot of tea. After it was served, King Kong said, This is the new tea that just came out this year. Try it and see if it suits your taste. If you like it, I'll pack a pound for you when we go back. Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness. Gu Qingrui smiled, then picked up the teacup and sniffed it thoughtfully. The tea is clear, and it smells strong and refreshing. It must be a high-grade Longjing tea. Not bad. It seems that you're also a tea lover. Try the taste. After King Kong finished speaking, as if to dispel his worries, he first raised his cup and took a sip. Gu Qingrui raised his guard when he saw this. There's no problem with the tea, Zhou whispered into his ear. When the servant girl made the tea, she saw that it wasn't tampered with, whether it was the tea or the cup. Gu Qingrui smiled and raised his cup, too. Thank you, Your Highness. Drinking a mouthful of such tea was really a rare pleasure. He nodded and commented, the taste is mellow and sweet, as expected of a top-grade Longjing tea. Ha, it's good that you like it. Drink a few more cups. After that, the two of them drank tea and chatted. Afterward, King Kong brought him around his residence until lunch. The dishes were mainly fresh vegetables and seafood, which were quite delicious. The wine was a rare 100-year-old Shaoxing wine. In short, the meal was lovely. Gu Qingrui did not relax even after all that. Instead, he became even more vigilant, as he did not believe he had come here today just to be treated to a meal. After the meal, Gu Qingrui drank another pot of tea. He stood up and said, "Thank you for your hospitality today, Your Highness. It's getting late, and I have matters to attend to in the afternoon." "Oh, do stay. I'm free now, and it's very dull. As for you, you don't have to work in the government office anymore either. You can play a few games of chess with me before you leave." King Kong did not wait for him to reject and brought him to a pavilion in the garden to play chess. Chapter 169 Lady, please have some self-respect. Gu Qingrui saw that he couldn't avoid it and could only agree to play some chess games. However, his Go chess skill was not that good. He only won 1 game out of 5. Gu Qingrui stood up and said, "Your Highness, let's call it a day. I really have something to do in the afternoon." "Don't, it's boring here. Let's play another round and wait for this pot of tea to be finished before leaving." "Sure, please take a seat first. I have to go to the toilet." "That's good. There's a toilet when we pass by this garden." King Kong pointed to a spot. "Wait a moment." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he walked through the garden to the toilet. When they reached the garden, Zhou reminded him, "Be careful. There are 2 maids and a girl hiding outside the garden. Moreover, that woman is really beautiful. If I'm not wrong, King Kong is trying to use a honey trap to rope you in." "I understand. I guess you have to protect my innocence." "Alright, don't be silly. I put 2 packets of itching powder in your pocket." Just as Zhou finished speaking, Gu Qingrui had almost reached that position. The sound of women talking could be heard at this moment. When Gu Qingrui saw this, he immediately grabbed the itching powder in his hand. But before he could do anything, a green figure rushed towards him. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui threw her away and strode off. "Stop right there, you lecher," a servant girl spoke in a delicate voice. Gu Qingrui did not even bother with her. Instead, he quickly left. When the servant girl saw this, she was stunned. She chased after him and grabbed his arm. Gu Qingrui quickly dodged and said with a frightened expression, "Lady, please have some self-respect." After saying that, he ran to the side. "You," the servant girl looked at him, who was acting as if he was guarding against hooligans. She was so angry that she did not know what to say for a moment. On the other end, Gu Qingrui went to the toilet and closed the door, staying even after finishing his business. He pulled his clothes and hair slightly, as if someone had tugged them. The people who came and went looked at him curiously, but no one said anything when they saw his extraordinary clothes. King Kong was drinking tea while waiting for the show to begin. However, after 25 minutes, the show still had not started, and Gu Qingruo was nowhere to be seen. He could only stand up and lead his men to look for him. When he saw a lady and her 2 servants walking back and forth uneasily in the garden, he asked in surprise, "Olve, where is he?" "Your Highness, he's inside. He went in and never came out." The lady pointed at the toilet and whispered, "Did you succeed?" Olve shook her head and replied, "I've been shaken off. I pulled him, but he just told me to behave himself." The servant girl, who had stopped Gu Qingruo earlier, replied with a flushed face. King Kong was speechless when he heard that, and the corners of his mouth twitched. He did not expect a grown man like Gu Qingruo to have such a pretentious side and was not afraid of losing face. No, he was showing weakness deliberately. He was trying to avoid this by acting as a weakling. Just as he was about to instruct them further, Gu Qingruo ran over. "Your Highness, you're finally here. Oh, are you waiting for me to pick you up?" "Of course. I realized that this was the only way back. However, these 3 girls refused to leave, so I had to wait inside." "You're too cautious. What can happen in my residence?" King Kong was miffed when he heard that, and he replied unhappily, "No, men and women don't even sit at the same table after the age of 7. If others see us together, it won't be good. If word got out, it would be bad for your Highness too." Chapter 680 Escape, You Are a Man. King Kong glared at him. "It is precisely because I am a man that I should be self-disciplined. I have to think for my family and my wife." Just as Gu Qingruo finished speaking, Hong Suji clapped her hands and walked over. "I admire you. Lord Gu is really a good husband. Greetings, Princess Consort." Gu Qingruo quickly cupped his fists and said, "Lord Gu, please rise." Hong Suji swept a glance at everyone present and then looked at King Kong. "Your Highness, what are you discussing?" "Nothing. Why are you here?" King Kong looked at her suspiciously. For a moment, he couldn't figure out if she had come here intentionally or unintentionally. "It was too stuffy in the house, and I couldn't sleep, so I came to the garden to take a walk. I happened to see you guys and walked over." After Hong Suji finished speaking, she waved the handkerchief in her hand and slowly fanned herself. King Kong looked at the beads of sweat on her nose and forehead, but he couldn't blame her. He could only say, "I see. I still have to accompany Lord Gu. It's all right. I still have something to do, so I won't disturb you and your wife," Gu Qingruo said. King Kong turned his head and glanced at him. He knew that there was no chance of success today, so he nodded. "In that case, let's continue another day." He waved at the guard and asked him to send Gu Qingruo out. Gu Qingruo heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. He obediently followed the guard and left the residence with his first aid kit. It was only when he returned home that he heaved a sigh of relief. When he saw Zhou Ying waving at him from a pavilion beside the pond, he quickly walked over and sat opposite her. "Thank you for your reminder today. It's also for myself. I don't want to have another sister. I wouldn't dare." Gu Qingruo quickly waved his hands. "But I'm afraid King Kong won't let go easily. That's for sure. I'm sure King Kong will be coming up with another plan. I'm afraid he'll come over to propose marriage openly tomorrow." Proposing marriage. It seems that he won't stop until he sends someone in here. Well, I guess there's no need for us to save face for him anymore. Yeah. Since he's not afraid of his bad reputation spreading, let's help him promote it. The husband and wife looked at each other and smiled. In the evening, when it was about time for dinner, Heartwarming came in with a roast goose. "Brother Gu, sister-in-law, I'm here to freeload again. What are you talking about? Brother Zhou, please sit down. Zhou Ying stood up and handed the roast goose in her hand to Xiaoxiang. Take it to the kitchen and slice it. Yes. Xiaoxiang took the roast goose and walked out. Gu Qingrui poured him a glass of water. Brother Zhou, why are you free to come over? Aren't you busy? Seeing that there was no one in the room, Zhou Huaiming replied, It's time for dinner anyway. I came to look for you today for serious business. Let's eat first and talk about it after. Alright, do you want a glass of wine? No, there have been many things recently. It's better to stay sober at all times. Here, a bowl of rice and mung bean porridge to relieve the heat and hunger. Zhou Ying scooped a bowl of porridge for him. When Xiaoxiang came in with the plate of roast goose, the three buried their heads in their food. After eating, they went out for a walk before returning to the pavilion by the pond in the courtyard. After Zhou Ying prepared chrysanthemum tea for them, she took Niu Lirong to the pond to feed the fish. At the same time, she also kept an eye on the people in the residence, especially Xiaoxiang, to see if she would come over to eavesdrop. Sure enough, Xiaoxiang walked over with a plate of snacks. Zhou Ying called her over and said, Let me see what you have here. Since you agree, then come to the residence tomorrow night and we can discuss it together. Alright, what time? Before midnight, you must be there on time. Definitely. There's one thing I don't understand. Since you wanted to participate, why did you remind His Highness about Qiao Lanlan sabotaging the main wife? Later, you even reminded Uncle Feng to save the princess consort and the child in her stomach. That's another matter. The first time, honestly, I saved her because I was afraid something would also happen to His Highness. The second time, the Su family wasn't just sabotaging the princess consort, but the entire residence, including us husband and wife. Moreover, the princess consort and the child are innocent. I'm not afraid to tell you that the emperor asked me before, asking that I favor one of the princes more. Chapter 682 Forced 1. What did you reply? Zhou Huaiming asked curiously. I said that it was the emperor's family matter, and as an official, I couldn't comment much. Zhou Huaiming was stunned for a moment before he laughed. Family matters. Huh, you're really cunning. Didn't the emperor pester for an answer after that? He just smiled. Maybe he felt that he couldn't get anything out of me, so he didn't ask anymore. Yes, strictly speaking, the succession of the throne is really the emperor's own family matter. However, the status of the royal family was too high. Their family matters are national affairs, and every time, it will be a bloody storm filled with killing intent. To put it bluntly, it's all about power. Zhou Huaiming nodded in agreement, and they chatted for a while before Zhou Huaiming went home. Zhou Ying saw that he didn't bring any attendants with him, so she watched him enter the prince's mansion. Only then did she retract her divine senses. After entering the interspace at night, Gu Qingrui hugged Zhou Ying and asked, Babe, you heard our conversation, right? You won't blame me, right? No, it seems that we can't hide anymore. Why don't we help King Rui? He's the chosen one anyway. Okay, then we have to be more careful in the future. Especially you. Bring 2 more people with you when you go out in the future. Alright, I'll make more self-defense medicine in 2 days. Make some poison, too. In the future, having those will be a matter of life and death. Roger that. Gu Qingrui kissed her deeply and said, Let's end this early tonight. Zhou Ying paused for a moment before she smiled. Alright. The next day, while the couple was having breakfast, King Kong came in with the girl from yesterday. When he saw the cherries on the table, he said, Cousin, you and sister-in-law's lives are doing well, there are even cherries for breakfast. Compared to the lychees in the prince's residence, they really paled in comparison. Gu Qingrui stood up and bowed. Your Highness, have you eaten? Do you want to sit down and eat together? No, I came over after breakfast. You guys continue eating. Then we won't stand on ceremony. Gu Qingrui asked Niulirong to serve tea to the prince while he and Zhouying quickly ate. After the meal, Gu Qingrui sat at the head of the table and said, "The only tea that can be served in the residence is pure tea. I hope you don't mind." No need to say that. Pure tea is great too. Let's play 2 rounds of chess. Sure, cousin's playing style is very novel, we can discuss it together. You flatter me. No matter how novel it is, I still lost to you a few times. Gu Qingrui stood up and said, "Wait a moment. I'll go get the chessboard now. There's no hurry. There's a serious matter to discuss today. Let's talk about it after we're done." King Kong pointed at Livy, standing at the side, and asked, "About this young lady, do you have any impression of her?" "No." "Why? What special relationship does she have with you?" Gu Qingrui glanced at Livy and shook his head. King Kong was a little surprised to see that he was not interested at all. Livy was the woman he had carefully selected and nurtured. Not to mention her looks, her temperament was that of a sheltered girl from a humble family. She had an indescribable innocence that made people want to protect her at first glance, so King Kong did not expect Gu Qingrui not to be moved at all. He just didn't know if he was really unmoved or if he was deliberately rejecting him. "I didn't expect you to be such a gentleman. This lady is related to me, the younger sister of one of my deceased subordinates. After the disaster, there was no one at her home, so she has been staying at my residence. I didn't expect her to fall in love with you at first sight yesterday, so I specially came with her today to fulfill a blessed couple." Chapter 683 Forced, 2, but I have no feelings for her. Gu Qingrui rejected him directly. King Kang's expression stiffened. "You can slowly cultivate your feelings, as long as..." Gu Qingrui shook his head and said, "Some feelings can be cultivated, but some feelings can't. It's like when a bandit kidnaps a woman. They would kidnap her because they are interested. Any woman who doesn't catch their eye would be beaten up even if they tried to get close to them forcefully." Gu Qingrui looked at Zhouying and said, "Moreover, my wife and I are a true couple of life and death. I think your Highness knows a thing or two about how many life and death situations we have experienced together. So, as a man, I can't let her down. But so far, she hasn't even given birth to a child with you. I said before that it's not that we can't give birth, but that we don't want to. Besides, so what if we can't give birth? As long as we can grow old together, nothing is better than anything. As for children, if they aren't filial, we might as well not have children." "Why? Do I annoy you?" Livy asked with tears in her eyes. "No, but I don't like you either, just like how I never liked roses." "Do I think roses are bad?" "No, but I just don't like it." Perhaps this was what people often said, each person had their own preferences. "Gu Qingrui, do you want to fall out with me?" King Kong questioned with a cold expression. He had never met someone who didn't give in to his request. He was really pissed at this moment. "What are you saying? A relationship between men and women has always been consensual. What does this have to do with falling out with you?" King Kong was so angry that he stood up and demanded, "What if I forced her to stay?" Gu Qingrui was about to speak when Zhouying stood up. "If your Highness wants to keep her here, it's not impossible." Ovi looked at her in surprise. She had never seen anyone take the initiative to leave a love rival for herself. For a moment, she couldn't tell what Zhouying was planning. Even King Kong asked curiously, "What's your condition?" "A death contract." She can stay as long as she is willing to sign a death contract. Zhou raised her head and replied. You two are sure something else. King Kong almost exploded in anger when he heard that. Would he have gone through so much trouble if he had only wanted to send a servant over? You flatter me. There must be some restrictions. Otherwise, if there are any embarrassing rumors, it will be too late to regret later. Zhou replied with a smile. She looked at Levi and asked, Do you need me to prepare the contract now? Since you fell in love with my husband at first sight and even took the initiative to beg His Highness to come with you, you probably don't care about this contract, right? Levi's face turned green with anger when she heard that. However, she did not vent it out. Instead, she clenched her fists tightly and looked at King Kong, whose face was also frighteningly dark. When King Kong saw this, he walked out with a green hue. So it wasn't love at first sight but lust. That's not surprising. 90% of love at first sight is always due to lust. King Kong turned around and looked at Zhou with a murderous look on her face. Levi was so angry that she threw the bag in her hand at Zhou. Zhou pulled Gu Qingrui aside and dodged in a flash, and the bundle smashed onto the table. The table shook, and the teacup on the table immediately fell to the ground. King Kang's cup of tea fell to the ground and shattered into 8 pieces. Tsk, with this strength, I really don't know if she's here to be a concubine or a spy. After Zhou finished speaking, she picked up the bag and threw it back to Levi. She threw it with all her might. Levi staggered a few steps before stopping after she was hit. Go to the garden and have the Miao father and daughter collect some rose petals. Yes, Xiaoxiang responded and turned to leave. After she left, Zhou sat outside and drank a pot of tea. At the same time, she spread out her divine sense to look at King Kong. At this moment, King Kong had already returned to the residence in a carriage. However, Olve was walking on the street with a bag on her back. The anger and killing intent she emanated made people flinch and hide far away. Zhou shook her head. Tsk, King Kong will lose his beloved if he does this. Although she might hate us more. She was right. Although Levi was resentful of King Kong for abandoning her on the streets, she hated Zhou more. Especially Zhou Ying's last sentence, saying that she was simply lustful for Gu Qingrui. If it weren't for the prince's deliberate arrangement, would she even have taken a fancy to him? But she could not refute this claim, even though she was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She wanted nothing more than to tear Zhou apart. Chapter 685 Counterattack. Soon, it was nighttime. After dinner, Gu Qingrui took 2 bags of snacks and brought Lin Yitian to the residence of King Rui. Of course, Zhou used her divine senses to escort them over. After making sure that they had safely entered the residence of King Rui, Zhou looked at the residence of King Kong again. At this moment, King Kong had also learned from the servant's report that Gu Qingrui had entered King Rui's residence. He angrily slammed his fist on the table and said, How dare he refuse my goodwill? Fine, don't blame me for not giving you face, too. Then, he called Levi over and said, Go prepare yourself later. Go to the courtyard on the west side and sleep with Gu Qingrui tonight. Your Highness, can you change someone else, the couple? This is the chance for revenge that I'm giving you and also your mission. Or could it be that you can't even deal with a pair of country bumpkins? Zhou gritted her teeth in anger. You're the country bumpkin, you damn ancient era king. A wicked smile flashed across her eyes, and she immediately took action. Levi suddenly felt something enter her nose. She rubbed its nose and said, I understand. Go and prepare. Yes. Levi turned around and was about to leave after saying that, but after taking 2 steps, she felt dizzy. She quickly raised her hand to support her head, but before she could, she fell to the ground stiffly. King Kong was shocked when he saw this. At the same time, he felt something enter his nose and could not help but sneeze. He quickly went forward to check on Levi. After confirming that she had only fainted, he had no choice but to help her onto a chair. At this moment, the faint fragrance of a woman wafted into his nose from Levi's body. He immediately felt a wave of frustration, and his body reacted at the same time. As someone experienced, he quickly understood what was going on. However, now was not the time to mess around. He immediately let go of Levi and shouted for help. At this moment, the fragrance entered his nose once again. The hormones in his body immediately overtook his rationality fiercely, and his instinct took over. After trying to control it once more, he failed and pounced on Levi. Not long after, bashful sounds came from the study. The servant girl outside heard it with embarrassment. "Shameless vixen, I can't believe she's coveting His Highness." After saying that, she gritted her teeth and looked into the room with unwillingness and resentment. In the end, she sat down dejectedly. "Whoa, it looks like there's someone else who really wants King Kong too." "As you wish, then." Zhou also gave the servant girl a whiff of aphrodisiac. Mainly from the merchants who come and go, buying the dumpling as travel expenses. There are also some who bought those dumplings in batches to be sold at different docks. At that time, I gathered women from 3 villages for their help for 6 days. I had to buy a lot of glutinous rice through my uncle, Manager Lu, too. "I see. How's the restaurant's business now?" Zhou nodded and asked. With the rice that she had distributed, it would be good if they could even earn 2,000 taels of silver from it. Although it's not as popular as when it first opened, we can still earn about 100 taels a day because the dock has returned to normal. If we want business to recover fully, we would have to wait at least another year. That's true. After 3 to 4 years of disasters, the people must have suffered greatly. It's difficult to recover in a short period of time. Oh, right, Hongyun restaurant has opened for business, right? Zhou asked. Yes, it's opened. Currently, it is on par with our restaurant's income, but they are busier than us. It's fine as long as business can be maintained. By the way, how many people have come along this time? Is there enough manpower at home? Don't worry, I left enough workforce there. As for the kitchen helpers, there are a total of 6 newbies and veterans combined. Li Si and 9 others who knew martial arts also came. I don't know if they're enough. If not, I'll think of another way. 1. Chapter 687 Invite 1, that's good. When you go back, try your best to cultivate someone who can take over your position. After our business here matures, you'll have a lot of work to do. Zhou nodded. Sun Hongliang was delighted when he heard that and knew Zhou was planning to put him in an important position in the future. He stood up and bowed. Thank you for your kindness. I will definitely do my best to share mistress' worries. As long as you don't disappoint me, I'll leave the restaurant and the manor there to you. Also, see if there are any more manors for sale. Mistress, can you tell me what it's for? Mainly to build a workshop, so don't choose a place that's too remote. Understood. I'll start preparing after I return. After that, the two of them chatted for a while before Zhou Dashing arranged for him to stay in the guest house. On the other end, Gu Qingrui checked the martial arts of Li Si and the others. Seeing that they could withstand more than 100 moves under him, he was quite pleased, so he temporarily handed them over to Lin Yitian. On the other side, after Biaozi tested Qiu Yu and the others' cooking skills, he was also very satisfied. At least they could be chefs in the kitchen. Of course, he also pointed out their shortcomings and asked them to improve on them. When Byazo saw them, he remembered that he had recommended his chef friend to Zhou. After settling them down, he hailed a carriage and went to a small farmhouse in the western suburbs to find Chef Xie, whom he had mentioned before. When Chef Xie, who was weaving baskets in the courtyard, saw him enter, he immediately stood up. "Shao Qi, you should leave. I said I wouldn't come be a chef again. I didn't come here to persuade you but to bring you out for a walk. If you still don't want to return as a chef after we come back, I won't bother you anymore." After Qilin finished speaking, he pulled him into the carriage, locked it, and brought him to a school not far away. It was almost time for school to end, so Qilin brought Chef Xie to hide on the other side of the carriage. Because many families had rushed to pick up their children, their arrival did not attract much attention. Chef Xie looked at him suspiciously and asked, "Why did you bring me here?" "Quiet, you'll know later." After Qilin finished speaking, he leaned against the carriage and waited. About 15 minutes later, the children came out of the school one after another. When Chef Xie saw his grandson Xie Jiagan come out, he was about to raise his hand to call him over when Qilin grabbed his hand and said, "Be quiet and watch." At this moment, someone threw a bun at Xie Jiagan and yelled, "Hey, Xie Jiagan, this is for you. Remember to come over early tomorrow morning to help me clean the classroom." "Got it." Xie Jiagan nodded and took the steamed bun. Just as he was about to put it back into his bag, a fatty rushed over and snatched the bun away. He took a bite and spat, "I thought you were supposed to be high and mighty. I asked you to help me wash my clothes, but you refused. Why are you helping Qian Er clean the classroom? Did you do it for this meat bun? It's a pity that you don't have the luxury to eat it. You, give it back to me. I exchanged it from my grandfather." When Xie Jiagan saw this, he went forward to snatch it away. But how could the fatty be willing to let go? He directly swallowed the meat stuffing in one mouthful. Then, he threw the rest of the steamed bun under his feet and stepped on it. Xie Jiagan was so angry that he pushed him down. "You peasant, you're simply courting death by pushing me. Brothers, attack." The little fatty got up and waved his chubby hand. Chapter 688 Invite 2. Immediately, 3 students came up and surrounded Xie Jiagan. Seeing that his grandson was about to be beaten, Chef Xie could not stay any longer and immediately rushed forward. This time, Qilin did not stop him and even followed him. "What are you brats doing? Do you want me to call your teacher out to see what you've done?" Xie Jiagan also saw Chef Xie and shouted unnaturally, "Grandpa, why are you here? If I hadn't come, I wouldn't have known you were actually bullied in school. Why didn't you tell Grandpa?" Chef Xie asked with heartache. Previously, he had noticed that his grandson was injured from time to time, and there were tears on his clothes. However, he always said that he fell when he was chasing his classmates or when he was picking up bird eggs from a tree. Chef Xie knew boys were mischievous, and it was inevitable for them to tussle with each other from time to time. He did not expect the truth to be like this. He looked at his grandson, who was as thin as a stick. Although the clothes he was wearing were not patched with holes, they were washed. It was obvious that he had worn them for a long time. Looking at the others, while their clothes couldn't be said to be brand new, their colors were still bright. No wonder his grandson was looked down upon and ordered around. What was the point of his persistence, then? Xie Jiagan saw Chef Xie's eyes turn red and was at a loss for words. Soon, tears fell. When the fatty and the other 3 saw Chef Xie and Qilin, they already had the intention to retreat. They immediately ran away when they got a chance. "Let's talk about it when we get home," Qilin said. "Yes, let's go home." Chef Xie took a deep breath and pulled his grandson into the carriage. Seeing this, Qi-Lin did not say anything else. Instead, he drove the carriage to Chef Xie's house. In the car, Chef Xie did not ask anything after he sat down. Instead, he hugged his grandson's small body tightly. Seeing this, Xie Jiagin raised his head and called out uneasily, "Grandpa. Why didn't you tell me?" Chef Xie asked. "Grandfather, your health is not good." After Xie Jiagin said that, he lowered his head. Chef Xie did not say anything to that. When they reached home, he called out to Qi-Lin, "Come have a sit." "All right." After Qi-Lin finished speaking, he tied the carriage to the door and followed him in. After sitting down, Chef Xie poured him a glass of water and said, "Thank you for today. Otherwise, I wouldn't have known that my grandson had suffered so much outside. I also discovered it by chance when I went back last time. That's why I think that if you really want to give your grandchild a promising future, you should try your best to give him a stable life first. Can you ask your mistress if it's possible that we don't have to sign a death contract? It'll come over if we can avoid that. Is it to let your grandchild take the imperial examination? Yes, this child likes to read. I can't ruin his future because of a job. I heard something today. Let me tell you." Qi-Lin then told him about Li Sheng and his son. "I heard that Xiao Yu got into the elementary school in the spring. Now, he had officially entered an academy for his studies." "Really? Why would I lie? My mistress has always asked for sincerity and will not force anyone." Chef Xie's heart was shaken when he heard that. He looked at his grandson, who was practicing his calligraphy seriously in his room, and finally nodded. "All right, as long as it doesn't affect my grandson's future, I'll accept this job." "That's great. When are you going to cook some dishes for your interview?" Chapter 689 Invite 3, Tomorrow. "I'll go over tomorrow," Chef Xie said. "Do you need any ingredients?" "No need. We can just use local materials. By the way, do you have any disciples? Can you bring them along?" Chef Xie was stunned for a moment and smiled bitterly. "I've had 3 disciples in my life, with the eldest disciple being my son. He's gone. My second disciple was separated from me when we fled from famine, and there had been no news of him so far. My youngest disciple, who was also my most intelligent disciple, had lost his sense of taste because of someone else. Now, he's no different from a cripple in cooking. He lost his sense of taste." Qi-Lin was stunned for a moment and felt a little disappointed. Then, he thought of something and asked, "But his cutting skills and plating skills should be fine, no?" "You mean, yes, the restaurant is short of people now, but it might be insulting for your disciple to only be a kitchen helper." No, it's already great to have a proper job now. How about this? I'll bring him along when I go over tomorrow. You guys can also take a look at his craftsmanship." Chef Xie shook his head repeatedly. His youngest disciple's life was even harder than his own, and he almost sold his child. If they had a job, their lives would be better. "All right, then I'll wait for your arrival at the residence tomorrow." After Qi-Lin finished speaking, he stood up and rushed back. After Zhou received the news, she specially informed Gu Qingrui and Sun Hongliang and even invited Zhou Huaiming over. At noon the next day, Chef Xie and his disciple cooked a table full of dishes. After Zhou Huaiming saw the dishes on the table, he picked up a small piece of lamb and tasted it. He looked at Zhou with surprise and asked, "Sister-in-law, is this chef surnamed Xie?" "He's the head chef of West City's Qingfeng restaurant. His surname seems to be Xie, but I'm really not sure where he worked before." "Why? Was Qingfeng restaurant famous?" Zhou asked. "They are quite famous and have been around since the previous dynasty, but unfortunately, the Marquis of Dingon boycotted it, and business gradually declined. During the disaster, the owner closed down and disappeared. A restaurant from the previous dynasty. Yes, so the taste they make is authentic. It's slightly stronger than our current taste, but their meat dishes are packed with flavor. I haven't eaten something like this for many years. After hearing what you said, I'm also tempted. Let's hurry up and eat. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he picked up a piece for Zhou and Sun Hongliang before picking up a piece for himself. Needless to say, the dishes were really amazing. Chapter 691 Overstepping Boundaries. So King Hui is going to make a move. Most likely, in case they are desperate, it's best if you don't go out for the time being. Alright. How are the arrangements at King Rui's side? It's almost time. King Rui's intention is mainly to save the emperor, and our mission is to protect King Rui's consorts and a few other important people's safety if anything happens. So next, I have to make some tear gas and knockout powder. Can you help me grind more chili powder and mustard powder? That's not a problem. It'll only take a few minutes. Zhou nodded. Okay, I'll wait for you to grind it now. I'll take it away in a while. Alright. Zhou went straight to the bedroom, closed the window, and entered her interspace. Then, she took out a gunny sack worth of ghost peppers and wasabi and put them into a grinder. After a while, half a sack's worth of powder shot out. She ground some more again and collected a full sack before leaving the interspace and handing it to Gu Qingrui. Gu Qingrui got up and took the bag. Don't wait for me if I'm not back by midnight. I know. Be careful. Zhou nodded. Since Zhou could not go out, she took out a batch of fine cotton cloth and made 2 sets of inner clothes for the 2 of them. During lunch, Xiaoxiang put down the food and asked, Mistress, aren't you going to wait for Master to come back today to eat together? He has something to do. He will eat outside at noon. What is it? Zhou looked up at her and said, Do you still remember who is the master and who is the servant? This servant spoke too much. In the morning, I just saw that Master was carrying a bag of chili powder out, so I thought that Master was only sending spices to the restaurant. It's good that you know. We're the masters, and you're the servant. There's no need to report to you what we do. I wouldn't dare. Go. If there's a next time, don't blame me for turning hostile. Zhou waved her hand and chased her away like she was chasing away a fly. After Xiaoxiang returned to the small kitchen, she looked at Niu Lirong with an aggrieved expression and asked, Sister Niu, does Mistress have something against me? Niu Lirong turned her head to look at her. Mistress has always been kind. It's you who went overboard with your words today. If it were another master, you would have been executed. Is it that serious? Of course, no master would be willing to be watched by their servants. Unless she takes the initiative to mention it, you can't ask about their plans. Didn't your trainer teach you these rules before? Xiaoxiang was stunned momentarily, as if she had thought of something. She replied with a smile, I haven't served someone in close quarters before, so I really haven't noticed. Niu Lirong didn't believe a single word, but she didn't overthink about it. She only thought that Xiaoxiang got carried away because Zhou was easy to talk to. Therefore, she ignored Xiaoxiang and started brewing bitter gourd and kumquat tea. Xiaoxiang excused herself politely and pulled out a piece of roasted sweet potato from the fireplace to eat. Zhou heard their conversation and snorted coldly. Although Xiaoxiang tried her best to make up for it, she knew very well that Xiaoxiang was really asking about Gu Shengruo's whereabouts. It was just that Xiaoxiang thought that her identity had not been exposed yet and was trying to find a way to eliminate her suspicion. Unfortunately, Xiaoxiang was simply trying to gild the lily, which made Zhou even more certain of her guess. Zhou wondered when Xiaoxiang contacted her superior and what kind of mission she had received. After that, Zhou had nothing to do, and she would monitor Xiaoxiang as long as she left the main courtyard. She finally found out how they met on the morning of the third day. It turned out to be Manager Zheng, who delivered winter clothes to the servants in the residence. She was the team leader for Xiaoxiang, whom she had discovered earlier. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.